Welcome to the whole Enchilada, a community of high achievers that fight the status quo, rebel against mediocrity, and make life happen. Let's go. Hey, Enchilada Nation, really excited to have you back today. As you know, over the last several weeks, we've been focused on the topic of leadership. And this is something I think that all industries, our economy in general, is starving for leadership, and not just by title, but by how we show up and the influence we have in our marketplace. So I've got another incredible leader and guest on the show today, who happens to be a great friend of mine as well, Jeremy Larkin, the CEO of the Larkin Group, one of the top real estate teams in St. George, Utah. Jeremy, thanks for being on with us today.
Happy to be on. Always happy to chat with you, my friend.
Yeah, and I want to be real clear with our people real quick. A lot of times we say real estate team, and anyone can be a team. They can be a team of one and market themselves as a team. I mean, we're talking about a legit team doing over $110 million a year, and not just having several people on the team, but also retaining the people on your team, which really is part of the conversation today. Is people go somewhere for an opportunity, they stay somewhere for who they're becoming and the culture of that organization, which is something that I've met with several people on your team and know them well. The culture you guys have done is pretty dang awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. Thank you, man. I love the way you phrase that. They go for an opportunity, and then they stay for who they become. And one of the comments I made right before we hopped on the air is the goal for us is to help people become good enough, great enough that they could leave. They could go out and start on their own, but really have them fed enough. And when I say fed, I don't really mean leads. I mean fed, that it's like, well, we don't need to leave, right? Like, I'm making plenty of money here. I love who I work with. I chatted with a guy, and you can ask a lot of questions, but I was in this random conversation with an agent from Northern Utah who said, yeah, we want to relocate to St. George. And he said, I've been looking at teams. Well, we were talking about a transaction we were involved in. Well, what it evolved into is teams. And I said, well, if you really want to be highly productive and have an absolute blast while you're doing it, we should chat. Yeah. And I know that's like, how do you even define having a blast? It's having a blast. It's what it sounds like. It needs to be fun when you walk in the morning, right? So
yeah, I love that. And I think that's a piece of leadership a lot of people forget. We think leadership is driving people forward, producing, but it is creating that fun factor of like people loving what they're doing. So there's kind of two sides of leadership that I want to talk about today, and I'm going to kind of let you drive the conversation which one we want to talk about first. But I want to talk a little bit about how you've acquired your leadership skills and kind of where you focus on growing your leadership with your team. But also, one of the things you and I were talking about the other night is that great leadership to others starts with self-leadership. And I know that that's been a big topic and study topic for you recently. So do you want to start with leading others, or should we start with self-leadership? This is like a choose your own adventure book.
Oh man, I like a choose your own adventure. I've forgotten about those. I think self-leadership is fun because I think let's do this. Let's just talk about them in tongue and groove, lockstep, right?
Let's do it.
So here's what I found, and I have a paradigm that I hope even one person who listens goes, I love the response, whoa, I'd never thought of it that way, not because I'm the guy that said it, because they're having an experience.
Yeah.
So this self-leadership thing is really weird because when I even talk about it, I don't feel worthy. And I'm going to present a paradox today for sure about self-leadership. And when I say I don't feel worthy is when I say self-leadership, and I don't know where you are, but I think a lot of your listeners might say the same thing. Self-leadership, well, anyone who's a really great self-leader is extremely disciplined and they have it all put together. Self-leadership, like, whoa, self-discipline, self-will. The paradox of self-leadership that I'm going through is, and it's funny, I had to get here the hard way, is that it's the admission that it's two things are simultaneously true. I have self-will, I have self-discipline, I'm working on myself. And the paradox is I don't have it put together at all. It's this, I'm put together and I'm not put together. And they seem like, well, how can you be put together and not put together? I think when you I think in the absence of the vulnerability that you don't have it all together, you're just a talking head, you know? And so my leadership style has been hyper vulnerable, and maybe even sometimes bringing crap to the office that's just, some people are like, whoa, that's too personal, right? But what I learned, and I learned this from a guy named Eric Hatch. He wrote an incredible book on leadership. I want you to look up Eric Hatch on Amazon. Eric was my personal coach for 3 years. Eric had a TED Talk that was kind of like the Brene Brown power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
But he taught me a concept, and then we can talk about self-leadership. The concept is that when you're vulnerable as a leader and you show up and you're human, you allow everyone in your organization to collectively exhale. And they exhale because they're like, oh, this guy's got problems too? Like, I thought he was just the Larkin Group guy that's done 450 live radio shows over the last decade. And I see his brand everywhere. He fights with his partner. His teenager is in trouble. Yeah. Because here's the issue, Marcus. Everybody is having problems in their personal life. And don't we listen to podcasts and go, hey, guys, seriously, am I wrong? That guy clearly has it all together.
Yeah, this happens all the time as we put people on pedestals, and so, sometimes the people that should be on the pedestals are the ones that are the most vulnerable to show, hey, we're all in this together.
Yeah. So correct. So, and I know I'm monologuing this, but I think it's important to hear philosophy. Yeah. So this paradox exists of self-leadership is attempting to have it all together and understanding and not having it all together. But here's where it comes into leading your people. You really can't go to your people and say, guys, honestly, everybody needs to put their fitness together when you're not the guy or gal that takes the stairs every day in your 3-story building. You can't do it. Don't do it. Now, somebody out there who's a real estate person might be like, well, I run a big team now. I don't lead generate. Am I a false prophet? Well, no, my lead generation, your lead generation is different now, right? We don't call expireds. We don't call FSBOs. I don't call 20 database a day or whatever. I have a different leverage, but I think self-leadership, I think the paradox is self-leadership is actually being self-aware. That's where self-leadership starts. And so I try to be the first guy in the room who says, geez, I blew it in there. Geez, I overtalked. Geez, I didn't listen enough. Holy cow, I spoke top down too much. That's self-leadership. Way before do you make your bed in the morning and work out and eat enough greens, right? That's where it starts in an organizational setting. You're the first person to go, I think I could have handled that better. That's my philosophy. Maybe now somebody else.
I think you're onto something here, because I think a lot of times people think that the words leadership and discipline are synonymous, right? And that is true. A lot of leaders are very disciplined. However, and I love how you split that into two sides, because I could be an incredibly disciplined person, but that discipline could be showing up consistency in the wrong activities, right? If I don't have clarity on where I'm going, and it takes some vulnerability for you to say, these are my shortcomings. I see a better version of myself to do this. This is where I need to go. You can't lead yourself there and apply that discipline in helping you progress forward if you don't have the vulnerable conversation of where you want to go or where you want to improve.
Correct. And look, I think the pressure, give you an example. I think the pressure to have it all put together is crazy. So this is just looks like a planner. So I recently became a certified a trainer for a company called Full Focus, Michael Hyatt's company. So I can put on little, basically seminars for people to figure out. It's old school Franklin Covey meets all of the modern, all the science from 2020, 21, 21, 22 on why and how goal setting works and keeping your life together. Well, here's the fun part. I trained my whole team on this system. The cool part is, A, I don't do it consistently every day. I'm at like an 85% executor. B, guess what though? Who's the first guy in the meeting every day with this in their hands? So here's this paradox. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do better. At the same time, my people see me in the huddle in this planner, right? So this paradox is existing, and it's hard to even sometimes put this into words, but I don't think self-leadership is being disciplined all the time, because what does Gary Keller say in The One Thing about discipline and will? It's, you don't have willpower on will call,
Yeah.
right? What happens to our willpower as the day goes on?
It diminishes.
It diminishes. Like, who wakes up at 7 a.m. and they're like, oh, I could use a bowl of ice cream. But at 9 o'clock, what are you saying? Oh, I could use a bowl of ice cream. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So, I love what Gary has to say, and that's why work-life balance is a myth. It's work-life counterbalance. This is a counterbalancing act for all of us. And look, I'm always aspiring. I look to you, and I look at everything that's on your calendar, and I look at all the businesses you and your partners and your brother are involved in. I'm like, I'm just a peon. But then I have a conversation with this guy on the phone today who's like, you guys did 110 million in volume? You mean to tell me your average agent makes 200K after splits the team? He's like, whoa. Which brings me to my next point. So do you remember when you and I talked about this trajectory versus this trajectory last week?
Yeah. And describe it a little bit too, because the majority of our listeners are going to listen to this, not watch it.
So yeah.
Describe it in a way that they can.
I'm going to describe it. I'm going to describe it, and I'm going to show it. Okay. So this is kind of fun, guys. This is not from a book, which is why I really love it. So this is like Jeremy Larkin Discovery 101. And then listen, I am a mess. If anybody wants to know who's a hot mess, I'm a hot mess. So for those who are watching, everyone's seen this meme. They're like, here's the start and here's the finish. And we always think the start is down low. And if you look at a chart, it's I started down low and the finish is up high on an angle. Bottom left of the corner up to the top right. How we think growth is. And they're like, what growth really looks like? Well, that is true, and it's cool. But here's what I learned. And I've learned this by School of Hard Knocks. I've had major family crises, all the things. Been in real estate for a long time. You can imagine there's been plenty of crises. It's not actually here to here. The continuum is actually left to right. And the continuum is
on a flat plane.
On a flat plane, it is and here's what the continuum is. Well, Jeremy, what's the length of that? Your time on earth. So, by the way, we're not getting into religion or anything like that, but I'm definitely into spirituality. But whatever your spiritual philosophy is, you have X number of years on earth. And it might end today, or you might live to be 100. It's a flat plane. And so the problem is with low to high is the only way low to high works is it now has to be compared to a metric. So I have to compare myself to Marcus, and Marcus has to compare himself to, say, his brother Matt, and Matt has to compare himself to Gary Keller that he works with daily. Where does it end, the comparison? It never ends. So flat plane is your template is your template. Marcus got one, and I got one, and Jesse down the hall got one, and Michelle down the hall got one. The flat plane means we're no longer in a comparison with anybody else. So it's not how am I doing? It's where am I at? I thought about this after we talked, and I wanted to get clear on this.
Yeah.
I stopped asking, how am I doing? Am I doing everything I should? It's where am I on the continuum of birth to death? And I don't mean age.
Yeah.
That's easy. I'm 46 today when we record this. So this has helped me realize that, or maybe I realized, and then it helped me draw this graph, but we're all just where we are. And this is a spiritual philosophy. Like, if you get into the AA or any of these groups, like, well, everything's exactly as it should be. Oh, well, that seems kind of, baloney. What is this, hocus pocus, woo-woo stuff? But the reality is you actually are. Right? You're exactly where you are in your journey today. You're not where you were. Perhaps you're not where you want to be, and you're not where you were yesterday. And in this self-growth journey, it takes you out of this endless comparison to somebody else.
And I think this is a huge plague for all of us right now, because of social media is a big piece of this, right? And this is, if you don't have clarity on what you want to become, and for a lot of people, honestly, I think this is what happens, is they wake up, pull up their social media, scroll 2 minutes, and they see a guy driving a Ferrari, and all of a sudden it's like, I want one of those. And then they scroll a little bit farther and they see somebody on vacation in Hawaii. They're like, I want that. And then they're constantly moving the end line of what success looks like for them. And that's why a lot of people are disappointed in the reality. And I love how you're describing it's where you're at in the plane, because if you think about like a bridge, a lot of us talk about where we want to end up and where we want to be. The thing that nobody wants to talk about is let's get clarity on reality. The current moment we're in, if we don't understand reality, right or wrong, it is what it is. We can't get into it. This is what it should be. This is where I should be in life. This is what I should have accomplished. We do ourselves a favor by saying, what is my current reality? And if I understand that and what I want to accomplish, now I can progress.
Well, dude, I love this. If you take in this social media thing, I want to address that. Look at social media if your marriage or partnership isn't great on Valentine's Day and see how you feel. You feel like crap.
Yeah.
Because what is everybody posting? The greatest decision I ever did was marry this woman or man. It's like, you don't know what's going on over at their house. You don't know. You have no idea the trials. And so there's a guy, and I hope that someone who listens will write this down. There's a guy by the name of Jeff Kober. And all you need to do is Google Jeff Kober Daily Thoughts. And you should definitely subscribe. I've listened to Jeff for every day, Marcus, for 4 years. I've read him every day. I might miss like a day a month.
Yeah.
365 all year long. Jeff Kober is a movie star. And when you see him, you'll be like, I recognize him. He was this B-roll in a movie. Well, Jeff got deeply into what is called the Veda or Vedic belief system. And it's basically, Jeff is like East meets West spirituality. It's super cool. And he got into meditation. And no, he didn't move to the woods because he realized that moving to the woods and being a monk wasn't going to be helpful to the planet. So here's this guy that's actually a celebrity in Hollywood. You can go meditate with him on Sundays in LA. And what the Veda and a lot of this teaches is like this idea that we are, and I didn't expect me to go here, but let's go here. We are so caught up in our thoughts and our feelings and where we're not. And what you said is then comparison. And we identify with it. We identify with the thought. I'm so angry. I'm so mad. You made me sad. You harmed me. And maybe you did harm me. Maybe you punched me in the face. But we identify with this. And then what we do is we start to identify with our job. I'm a banker. I'm a doctor. I'm a realtor. right? And so what we kind of do is we get out of presence all the time. Just all the time. We're just like, we're in a meeting thinking about how great is it going to be when our 236 deals from this last year is 436. Well, what will happen is when I start to talk to people, they're like, well, so do you not want me to have goals? I'm like, calm down. Have a goal. And he even addresses this in some of his writings. Have a goal. And yet the practice and the beauty of this whole thing in business is, how can I find total and complete satisfaction right now whilst striving? How paradox, right? But if I'm happy with what I have right now, I'll stop fighting. Guys, if you're listening to the Whole Enchilada podcast, trust me, you got a lot of fight in you. Right, Marcus? Right?
Yep.
That's the nature of this podcast, is these are achievers. But I think this is a plague, and you said the word a plague, is this inability to be happy. It's like when I get my car, when I get my thing, when I lose 30 pounds. And so I was having this conversation with 4 new agents yesterday at KW. They were doing the bold thing on the board. Robert, the team leader for non-KW people, a team leader is like the recruiter / sales guy for a brokerage. He said, will you come talk to these 4 agents? I'm like, yeah, I didn't know what I was going to say. So he drags me in there. We're doing this thing where we said they have $2 million and they have to spend it all psychologically. Well, I took the reins and took them down a different path. I said, do you guys know why you're doing this exercise right now? And they're like, so we can learn how to be rich. I said, you're doing this exercise to figure out where all your screwed up beliefs are. You're doing this exercise to catch yourself going, man, I feel like people with money are evil. Or people like me would never have that kind of money. Or no one in my family's ever earned that much money. And so we had some fun with, I said, this exercise is actually to help you think differently. And it's actually to help you paradoxically, because that's our word today, be totally cool with what you have. Because here's what my people are finding. The more they're happy with what they have today, the better all of their striving works. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get an energy, whatever. But they're like, the more that I'm totally good today, the more my striving is working. And that to me takes us all the way back. That's self-leadership. Self-leadership is being self-aware. And it's like, how can I be cool with what I have today? If I just got hit by a bus when I walked out the door right now, can I be okay? You know, or am I just gonna be like, oh, I wish I coulda, woulda, shoulda?
Yeah, I actually really love this conversation, because one of the things I talk to people all the time about is what is your internal voice saying? As you know, every single moment there's a voice going on inside of our head. And I think you're right that I would say 90% plus of what our voice is saying is either thinking future tense of what if I had these things, or how do I do this, or when I get there, or it's focused on the past, something that happened to them, something that they wish would have happened. And very little of our internal voice is actually saying, let me focus on the present. And then an aha I had with what you were just saying a minute ago is that when someone really has the ability to hone in on the present and maximize that present moment, that they find themselves on a faster pace towards what they want. And I think the aha I had for that is like, absolutely, if you're focused on the present and maximizing that moment, you're going to do the highest priority things to make that moment mean something. And imagine stacking those moments up over and over and over again.
That's
going to lead you to the goal.
Well, here's why. Because I sometimes feel like old Napoleon Hill sold us a bill of goods. Because when you look at Think and Grow Rich, which is beautiful and everybody loves it, but at the same time, it's like, you're just gonna like obsess about this so much you'll will it into existence. Here's the funny thing about Napoleon Hill. I actually learned about Napoleon Hill. He was a swindler. He didn't even have any money. Go look it up, guys. Go read this history of Napoleon Hill. And he had this idea that he'd write this book and he'd make all this money. Well, he actually taught some cool principles. But where I think the bill of goods was sold is that obsession is a lack of presence. So in Jeff Kober's reading today, he said it was called Unfulfilled Expectations. And I'll just read 3 2-sentence paragraphs. To carry an expectation is to have an appointment with disappointment, is the first paragraph. To carry an expectation to have an appointment with disappointment. All disappointment comes from unfulfilled expectations. And finally, if we would be rid of disappointments, we must first be rid of expectations. Here's the fun part. Let me punchline this, and then we can talk a tiny bit about leading people.
I like that.
It's powerful. I'll forward it to you today. I love it. I love this one. And he goes on and makes a really great quote that's from the AA Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, which is acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today. But the point here is, when you get out of obsessing with outcomes and you just stay present, then I think you get into your total. You and I are Big Leap fans, right? Big Leap is a book by Gay Hendricks. That's, gosh, so good.
Good.
You get into that genius zone, and I'm just like, genius zone to me is how would you define it? How would you define genius zone?
Yeah, it is hard to define, but ultimately that someone's genius zone is, what is it that they're so naturally inclined to do at a high level, and
like it's what you were born to do.
Impact that you want it to produce.
Yeah. What were you born to do? Here's the cool part: when you're able to totally accept where things are, you and especially in sales, you get to actually be masterful in your if it's calling a for sale by owner, or if it's writing a marketing piece, or whatever you people out there do, you get to actually be involved in the artwork of what you do, right? You're not, let's take a sales call. Instead of sitting there waiting, what's he going to say next? Because I can't wait to give my next line from my script. You're now actually in a human interaction with a lead, with a prospect. That's really cool, Because you're like, look, I'm just going to be here and be in this moment. And I wonder where this conversation is going to take me. Maybe it's going to take me somewhere kind of cool. That's presence. And by the way, I struggle with it every day. Because remember, what's the paradox? I don't have this crap figured out. I just know, guys, I know what it feels like, when you're in flow state. That's what we're talking about, right? When you're like, oh my gosh, I just don't even know where the time when I was in that flow state. That's what it feels like. So
I love this conversation, and I think it really plays a huge part into our leadership conversation, because I think generally speaking, when we have conversations around leadership, we're identifying external factors, either external leaders that we look up to that have had influence on us, or external factors of people we lead or want to lead and our expectations of them.
Correct.
And none of that matters if we can't figure out self-leadership. And per our conversation today, a lot of that is really getting clarity on what is my current reality and where am I, accepting it for what it is, and identifying what could change with that present reality to move you forward.
Yeah, amen. I share a funny little anecdote. In 2008, I just thought of this. And here's what's fun is I like that this conversation is organic, right? Yeah. You're going to do whatever you want with it. So in 2008, I went to a Tom Ferry seminar, and at that time, the whole world was melting down. Remember those days?
Yeah, yeah.
And my brother-in-law was getting just rocked on a real estate development and actually a real estate brokerage that he'd invested in. Okay. And he's like, oh my gosh, I had creditors coming after me. I don't even know what to do. Well, I'm sitting at Tom Ferry's summit, and they had Tony Robbins keynote. And we got like 3 hours. It was fun. And of course, it was Tony Robbins. We were jumping around and being nuts. And he said, the number one thing you can do when you leave this room today is go home and come to a clear acceptance and acknowledgement. You better write it down with exactly how bad or good things are today. But this is number 2. But you're not allowed to write down that it's worse than it is. It is clearly, you're just going to literally say, this is where it is today. So if somebody out there is in financial problems right now, which seems weird in this market, but it's possible. And later someone will be and they'll listen. But I love that. And he said, you need to go and accept things exactly as they are today. And here's why. He said, you cannot build from anything other than exactly where you are. So I call my brother-in-law. I'm like, dude, you listen to this. And he said, okay, I got to call my attorney. It was like he heard it, because what he was doing is he was running from it. He wasn't running from anyone. He was running from it. Right? So Marcus, in our financial world, I produced a lot of money for a decade of my business and didn't keep any of it. So we had this cool thing, and it was like, I'd get to the end of the year and be like, where'd the money go? The day that I finally met with my CPA, and it was so embarrassing, right? I just felt like, and my CPA is one of my best childhood friends. I felt like such, guys, for a better term, I just felt like such a dumbass. Like, dude, you produce so much income. Where did it go? And here's the funny part. It didn't go to boats and stuff like that. Actually, that would have been better. It just went to who knows where. And the day that I sat down and I was like, Patrick, dude, this is embarrassing. And you're talking a language I don't understand. It's not my first language, the language of finance. My world got better fast. Guys, from a vulnerability perspective, I was divorced in 2018. Let's just go here for a minute. Be fun, and we'll wrap up with this because we're probably out of time. That was not fun. And I have 4 children. And we can always get into the coulda, woulda, shoulda. And trust me, if you've been divorced, you understand how much coulda, woulda, shoulda you go through. You might do it for a whole lifetime. 4 years later, I still do it. And fortunately, my former spouse is a really lovely person. And so my kids have the benefit of like 2 rocking parents, right? That's been great. But to say that it wrecked me would be such an understatement. It's like, I remember that 18 was like, I was kind of like a zombie, like the Walking Dead. Like I was here, but I wasn't here. You know what I mean? And Robert, by the way, kept the company together. And my people kept my company together. And here's why I know I've been a great leader. My people saw that I was unstable, that I was kind of teetering. and they just stepped in and they kept the company together. Guys, it destroyed me financially. Absolutely destroyed me. And not because somebody came after me for everything. Again, but it was a rough time. And 19 was brutal, 18 was brutal, and well, 17 leading into it was brutal, and 18 was brutal because it was there, and then 19 was less brutal, and 20 was less brutal. I'd say in the last 6 months, the first time I felt totally and completely like myself. Here's the wild part. From complete ash and ruin to zero debt to $110 million real estate team. Just FYI, we were 35% margin in our business last year. You know, that's solid in our business. It's solid. There's better, but there's a lot worse. That was 4 years, guys. So, and I would aim it to self-leadership. And if you know my personal life, you'd be like, I don't know if he's really that good of a, but I would say, Marcus, it was born out of coming to grips with reality and coming to massive, extreme, painful amounts of self-awareness, right? And I was surrounded around by the right people. And the thing that's worked for the Larkin Group for 16 years is the rhythm of consistency, right? Like we've been on the radio for 12 years. We've held a Thursday team huddle for 10 years. We've held a Monday team huddle for 7 years, right? It's like our people always know we'll be here. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Sorry for going so deep on that. I
appreciate it.
I want it to be helpful to someone who needs to hear it.
Yeah, like, this is an expression of your leadership there, of you just being vulnerable and sharing your story, which a lot of times when people get invited to be on a podcast or a platform, they want to share all the accolades. And I love your leadership of showing up and saying, yes, I've got the accolades. Yes, I have these. Let me share the dark moment. Because I think people can really, really resonate with that. And I love your challenge to our listeners that you gave to your brother-in-law, your brother, of the idea of saying like, hey, let's take the challenge. A lot of us that are listening had great financial years last year, and that may not be the friction point, but there is a friction point in every one of our lives right now. And I challenge everyone listening, I'm going to do the same, is let's get over clarity on our current situation of how is your relationship with your kids? How is the relationship with the people on your team? How is your financial situation? How is your health situation? Because that is really what the whole enchilada is about, is achieving and living across all those platforms at a high level, because we need to have a reality conversation around each one of those aspects. And the more clarity you can get around where your current reality is, and then going back to the other aha you gave me today, is then you can say, how do I be more present in the perfect moments and stack those perfect moments up based on my current reality and just watch how things change in your world.
Dude, it is, Marcus, it is such an evolution. Everybody is improved around you. And it's funny, do most of your listeners know what the whole Enchilada trail is in Moab?
I imagine a lot of them do. It's funny when I wear my whole Enchilada shirt, some people are like, oh, you're a big mountain biker. I'm like, I do like mountain biking.
Yeah. It's funny because we wrote it in September. My kids were out there racing with high school. I'm a high school mountain bike coach. And for those who don't know, the whole enchilada, first of all, the whole enchilada is a term that everybody knows. Like, hey, we got the whole enchilada. Yeah. But the actual mountain bike trail in Moab starts at 9,500. Well, actually, we started at 95. The road was closed. The higher point starts at 11,000 feet above tree line, then into pines, then into aspens. When you finish, it can drop. It can rise, depending on the time of year, 50 degrees. And you end up in Moab at a couple thousand feet of elevation in full red rock desert. It is the whole enchilada. And so you just said it, man. Like, and I want to warn people, I want to caution people against something. When you go out and you go, okay, I'm going to address my whole life, please, guys, you got to have some grace, because that's a tough exercise. Like, oh, it's worse than I thought. Like I actually, health is such an easy one. I actually took my shirt off. I actually stood naked in a mirror and stood on a scale. And it's like, or, I actually looked at my finances and I'm like that Larkin guy. I made tons of money and I just don't even know where it went. Or truthfully, I looked around and my children and wife and cat are afraid of me. Maybe. Okay. That's it. That's self-leadership. That's where you start. And just have some grace. Like, and maybe you have to go through this. We by the way, this is our culture in our office. We go this deep. You might have to have a buddy with you. You better have a therapist or a darn close friend to say, I have done some looking in the mirror, literally or figuratively, and I'm not happy about all of it. But that's the growth. There you go.
I love that. I think that's a great note to end on, because a lot of us are so willing to give other people grace, but we are so hard on ourselves.
Correct.
But one thing that may encourage you to give yourself a little grace is that I found most of us find joy in giving grace to others. I found the better I get at giving myself grace and my self-forgiveness compounds and gives me more ability to give even more grace and forgiveness to others.
Yes.
So I think it doubles down where it betters your self situation and you can improve other people as well.
Love
Jeremy,
that.
You know that I think you're a freaking stud. I love the time we get to spend together.
Thank you.
And one thing I love about that is we always get to have some deep conversations, and you're a leader in my world. I grow when I'm around you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing with us. Any last thoughts from you that you want to share with the group before we wrap?
My last thought is seriously, go sign up for Jeff Kober's daily updates and challenge your thinking. You've been raised, we've been raised in a Western striving. It is very Western to strive. Is that fair? It's fair. It's a very American thing to do. Like, I'm going to build a business. And while you're doing that, and the reason I say go get his stuff is he's just one author that can start to challenge the way you think. And in our striving, we're missing a lot of stuff. And I don't mean just as simple as, oh, you missed your kids. No, I mean, you're just missing moments, driving yourself crazy. That's my final thought.
Love it. Sure appreciate it. All right, Enchilada Nation, you've
Thanks,
been
man.
challenged. Hopefully you heard the challenge. You felt it today. I'm inclined to be better, because I hope you are. And don't forget, go live life on your terms.